They've come from the bowels of hell.
The Dana Gould Hour.
Jungle worms and swamp rats run around your feet.
I bought a dog that killed the calf that ate the canary. What is truth?
And once again, welcome back.
Well, summer's almost gone, the kids are getting ready to go back to school, and fall is in the offing. And here on the Mulholland Drive View Shelf, that means only one thing. We only have 4 more months of blistering heat. But I'm still in an autumnal frame of mind. I dropped off my oldest daughter at college for her first semester. It's odd. The last 3 years of high school, 3 of the 4, are dedicated to do your PSATs, do your SATs, do your IRBs, get a good grade. You got to go to a good college tours, applications, got to do your college essays. We got to go look at colleges, got to get to do a good college. And after all that hard work, damned if they don't get into a great college, and then you're just about to drop them off and you think, wait a minute, where the hell do you think you're going? You're not going anywhere. This means your childhood is over. Why am I alive? Good question. Anyway, I did successfully drop her off at college, went back to the hotel, sat on the bed and cried into a pillow while watching The Hunt for Red October, like anybody else. Just sitting there sobbing, I didn't know Tim Curry was in this. Anyway, fortunately, I'm still eyeball deep in kids, thank God. But that was a gut punch I was not anticipating. Let me tell you. There you go. Little window into my private life. Anyway, we have a terrific show for you this month. Cult movie director Jeff Leiberman is here. Jeff has such classics as Squirm, Blue Sunshine, Just Before Dawn, Remote Control under his belt. He's worked with Rod Serling. He almost did a Broadway show with John Lennon. He's got stories for days, and they are all in his new book, Day of the Living Me. And he is here to talk about that. Jeff Leiberman. Me? Couple things. I will be joining our good friend Bobcat Goldthwait for the Limestone Comedy Festival in Bloomington, Indiana on September 2nd and 3rd, as well as at the Moon Tower Comedy Festival in Austin, Texas, September 23rd, 24th, and 25th. It is there, in good old Austin, Texas, that Bob and I are premiering our new film, Joyride. It is a tour documentary of our Show with Two Heads tour that we did in the waning days of pre-pandemic America, as well as the story of our somewhat rocky relationship over the years, and much, much more. It is really funny, it is really interesting, and I almost hate to say it, it's really a moving piece of work, all thanks to Bob, who directed it. I'm just in the thing. But when the pandemic hit and we found ourselves with a lot more time, Bob took what was going to be just a tour documentary and made something very unique. I hate to say it, but it's really great. It's worth seeing. It premieres in late October, and the world premiere will be at the Moon Tower Festival in Austin, Texas on September 25th. Go to Austin Theatre, theatre.org for details. Austin, AUSTIN, theater, THEATRE, the old world spelling, .org, and get your details. And we should get something up on danagould.com. Let me do that too. Thinking out loud right here during the intro. October will be a very busy month, as usual, for us here at the show. In addition to producing the mega Halloween episode of the Dana Gould Hour podcast, and we still have September's to do, we will also be filming Season 2 of Hanging with Dr. Z. Thanks to the excellent response to our Kickstarter, we are fully funded and moving full speed ahead with a new season of Hanging with Dr. Z with an insane roster of guests. Hanging with Dr. Z, the talk show that openly challenges evolution instead of making the viewer question it by how everyone on the show behaves. Season 2, Hanging with Dr. Z. All that stuff and so much more coming your way. How do we make all this happen, you ask? You. This podcast, Hanging with Dr. Z, they're all possible because of you and your generosity. And to everyone who contributed to the Kickstarter for the show or is a part of our Patreon here at the podcast, I want to take this opportunity to thank you. Here at the podcast, we only have one Patreon level, $5 a month, and you get some extra stuff. You get extra video every month, you get extra links to what we're talking about, you get some audio stuff. If you're not a member, please consider joining. Just go to danagould.com for details. It is the Patreon that makes the show possible, and we are forever in your debt. Go to danagould.com for details. And now, it's on to our filthy business.
Tune in, it's a gas. It's the Dana Gould Hour podcast.
The Dana Gould Hour. Free and worth it.
My guest today is a legendary figure in American cult cinema. We like to say cinema in general, but really in American cult cinema, he's a very legendary figure. I had the good fortune of meeting him. I think it was 2 years ago, back in the before times.
Yeah,
we met at a film festival in upstate New York. He is the writer and director of Squirm, Blue Sunshine, Just Before Dawn, and one of my favorite, my favorite movie that he made is Remote Control from 1988. He also made the excellent stand-up comedy documentary, But Seriously, and many other things. Please welcome your friend and mine, Jeff Leiberman.
Thank you. You can all sit. Stop applauding.
Now, Jeff has a new book out that is I guess it would be a memoir, a roman à clef, I'd like to say, called Day of the Living Me. It's a really, you can get it on Amazon, Day of the Living Me. It's a really great read. It's a really fun read. And it's one of those, you have one of those stories that you're came of age in New York in the sort of the independent movie world in the very, very late 60s, early 70s, all the way through
exactly.
Met everybody.
Right.
Twice.
I actually walked up and down the street and said, "Hello, how are you? Hello, how are you?"
But it really is true. You've met everybody, and so to that end, it's hard to know where to start. But I want to go with one of my favorite people who I've talked about a lot on this podcast, and then from there we'll move backwards and forwards. You hung out with Rod Serling.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Rod was hanging out with me, but
sure.
It sounds like such bullshit that I like to think it, but I would never say, "Oh, I just did say it."
But I interviewed his daughter a couple of months ago, and from the book, and you get the same sense of him that I got from Anne, and from the book. He was a really good dude. He was like a solid dude, not for a guy with that many accomplishments. He was not full of himself at all. He was.
Could you be negative, full of yourself? Could you?
Yeah, he was. What's the word? He was self-deprecating.
Yeah. I mean, any guy that has that kind of reputation and that gravitas, would you call it? I would, when I got to a point where he was cool with me, I opened the door. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you thrive on. I opened the door, I say, "After you." He goes, "No, after you." And I said, "I insist." And he goes, "Why, certainly." And he goes in, and then I run in front of him. That's Three Stooges. Yeah. I mean, so that's Rod Serling.
That was amazing.
There's no way you would know that watching that, Rod Serling on TV.
Yeah. So we should to set the stage. You started out, your first job in film was re-editing Swedish porn movies, essentially. Maybe not porn.
Yeah, well,
saucy.
It was called softcore.
Yeah.
Coined by late friend of mine, Paul Krasner.
Oh, I knew Paul.
Yeah,
he coined that phrase.
He was my friend for a gazillion years.
Paul of the realist.
Because first came porn.
Yes.
And then they said, okay, we're going to have porn. Forget it. It was like your dad's sock drawer, 8mm pornography.
Right. Stag films.
Yeah, stag films. So you can have movies in the movie theaters at 35mm, even if it's 42nd Street. You can't show that German Shepherds and all that. So you have to. So
what is the, not to go down a rabbit hole, but what is the appeal of that? Never mind.
You're obviously not a dog person. Anyway, so Paul Krasner came up with the term softcore, because that's what they were doing. Is like, I see a little of this, but all the things you can't see, and that's how they got on 42nd Street.
Yeah, and
so I was,
and there's like the Emmanuel films and things like that. Yeah,
and there would be like, if it made money, Emmanuel goes to college. Emmanuel goes to
the free clinic.
Yeah, right.
And so your job, this was before you worked at Janus Films,
right?
You're re-editing these.
I wasn't doing the re-editing. I didn't know how. You were
assisting.
I knew how to make a splice. Which is, today, it's a totally useless skill.
Yes, it is. It's like
splice in a 35mm print that people don't know about. But I would make the splice, and this woman was cutting it. The woman was cutting
this sort of bossy woman who cuts softcore porn for a living.
Right. Exactly.
But you ended up at Janus Films, which is a very high-end Ingmar Bergman. You know, they get a lot of foreign films, and for people that watch a lot of Criterion issues, it's their icon is like the Greek coin or whatever it is. It's a very arty-farty Janus.
Two heads facing opposite ways.
And you had an idea where they were cut because they needed to repurpose their content. It's just like today. We have all this stuff. What do we do with it? And you came up with this idea of like, well, we'll take all of these classic films and re-edit them into like film school. Like, this is the story of editing. This is the story of.
Well, that was the art of film, but in all fairness, the idea of repurposing stuff was Saul Terrell, who was the president of Janus, and that's why he hired me. He called it mining gold. We already own this stuff, and we already have this stuff in distribution. But how do we wring out more money out of this without licensing other things?
Yeah, that's that was Joe Dante's first job for Roger Corman, was making a movie out of trailers.
Oh, really?
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
Oh, I got to talk to Joe about that. Yeah, but that's basically what I did, and it was, once I got the hang of it and what they wanted. I made a little children's film called The Unicorn out of a multi-million-dollar movie called Kid for Two Farthings, which is a rank organization. It was, and it was Carol Rice direct. It was an awful movie, but within the movie there was this cool little story with a little boy and a goat that he thought was a unicorn because he had a horn in the middle of his head.
Right.
And I said, this is like a sentimental little story. If I get rid of Diana Dors and a wrestler, and all these, it was Primo Canera it was
Jesus.
The worst. But if you took them out, there was this tender little story within it, and I cut it, and I got Barry Gray. Remember, Barry Gray was a radio guy, and he had gravitas.
Yeah.
And I had him narrate it for the bridges, because once you cut up a movie, it's not going to make sense. The transitions weren't shot that way. So you have Barry Gray smooth over the transitions. And we sold it to CBS Network, Saturday afternoon on network that paid from my salary for like a year and a half.
Wow. That's
mining gold.
Yeah. And so when you did The Art of Film, your idea was to get Rod Serling, because again, you needed it narrated by somebody with a lot of gravitas.
Right.
And you didn't know him. It was just a cold call, right?
Well, it was a lukewarm call.
Yeah. You knew somebody that was a student.
I knew somebody who was a student at Ithaca College my friend Fred Berner, and he made the connection. But then it was all up to me to kind of win him over,
Right.
I did.
Yeah, it's an interesting story because you said when you first spoke to him on the phone, and this is like 1971, two, yeah. I just imagine a phone wearing bell bottoms with big sideburns. You're talking on the phone, and he's very standoffish, and it takes a long time until he realizes that you're a cool guy and that this isn't bullshit. And then the minute he was assured of that, he became a different person.
I told his daughter this, but I don't know if she liked it or not, but this reality. The minute that he felt comfortable for me, this is what he did. 2 Polacks walk into a bar. And I started laughing. This is Rod Serling telling me a Polak joke, right? It doesn't matter. He thought, because I'm laughing, that I love Polak jokes, right? So from then on, it was the thing, like they'd say, it's Rod Serling on line 3. I pick it up. He goes, a Polak and a rabbi and a zebra walk into, and it's like, whoa. And I'm laughing. So it was like, Rod, I'm laughing at the fact that the Rod Serling of the Twilight Zone is telling me, I'm not laughing at Polish.
Joke, yes.
To this day, he does, well, he's dead, but he doesn't know. But you know what? I was laughing, and that's all he wanted. You think about it.
Yeah, no, well, it's also, he was just like, he wouldn't just, humor is how it's the second of the handshake. It's like you shake somebody's hand and then you share a joke, and it's an equalizer. Yeah.
So that was that's
how people reach.
Polish joke.
The last story I wanted to touch on for that is one of the filmmakers that he had to narrate was Leni Riefenstahl, Hitler's favorite director.
Is it
Probably Riefenstahl. I don't know. Riefenstahl. But who made Triumph of the Will, the famous Nazi propaganda film. And he's looking at the text of
Olympiad, which was the 1934 Olympics in Berlin, where Jesse Owens. And they used it. She cut a film to make it a propaganda film that they were the Aryan race and they can win everything.
Right.
That's the reason why they were so upset when Jesse Owens kicked their ass.
I know. And what did Serling say when he saw the text?
He goes, Leni Riefenstahl, that Nazi cunt. And I went, cut. I mean, I was like, okay, how are we going to do this? Because it's, I took him out in the hall and I said, listen, this is called the art of film, okay? And I told him the story about how I wouldn't want to meet her. She was in the office, and I said, I'm going to duck out to lunch at 11 o'clock in the morning, because if I met her, I really didn't know myself. You kind of know yourself. I didn't know if I'd shake her hand and hang on to it and throw her out the window.
Yeah.
So if you don't know, you don't want to put yourself in that position.
Well, she wasn't in jail. I mean, but ostensibly, she could have gone to jail.
But the truth of the matter is, she invented montage that we use today in sports. If you see Olympiad, it was, say beyond ahead of its time. It was beyond the valley of head of its time.
Right.
With like making a dive go on for like a minute, one dive, spinning around and all, slow motion, all that. So it's called the art of film, not what's the political affiliation.
Right.
Yeah, and Rod looked at me, he goes, puts his cigarette out, and he goes, Jeff, fuck you. And that meant I'm right. I knew that's what it meant. And I told the guys, we're going to get one take on this.
Yeah.
And he did it. And if you watch the art of film, you can hear that he wasn't digging that segment, but we did get it.
That's amazing. Just to be in New York, you at that point in time was so, because you talk about working in a room and Andy Warhol was there, and you say in the book, like, but back then, like, seeing Andy Warhol was like, he was everywhere.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of these kind of iconic things happen that were invented later. You know, even Woodstock, you know, it's
Yeah.
supposed
You almost went to Woodstock.
No, I was at Woodstock.
But you did get there.
Yeah,
But,
we got
but
there.
the story was.
Yeah, the story was getting there.
Yeah.
But so many things get, you know, myth. Most stories are myth, like the Bible. You know,
Yeah.
that reality doesn't work for humans. They have to have these mythical things.
Yeah.
You know? And I saw the way these things grew. Big Times Square. At the time, they called it, 42nd Street. They didn't call it grind houses or anything. There was nothing romantic. It was smelled like piss. There was
It was Hollywood Boulevard right now.
And if you went into a theater, I mean, it was disgusting, right?
Yeah.
But now, and they did.
Well, Joel Schumacher told me that during the early 70s, those theaters were basically a great place to sleep for a long time. For a little, it was better than it was cheaper than a motel. And if you were a junkie or something, you could just pay $2 and sleep in the theater for 3 hours or something.
Especially when it's like 90 degrees out in the summer, and they have that big frosted
air
sign.
conditioning.
I mean, it's cool inside. Sam Markoff used to say that from AIP. He said there's a certain amount of business that you're going to do from that sign. Doesn't matter what movie is playing in the theater.
Wow.
That they're going to go in because air conditioning was pretty rare. People didn't have air conditioning.
Right.
They had money, and even offices was hit and miss. But come in, it's cool inside. It's 70 cents or whatever it costs. That's
right.
Cool.
Yeah, you can go in there for free, and if it's a double feature, you can go in there for 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of junkies just needing a place to sleep. They didn't want to spend for a hotel room.
Right. Well, the seats didn't recline, but
Yeah. Well, imagine if you're a junkie, it's
they do their own reclining.
Yeah, but it's true. Well, and then there are people that are, your story about, you're the second person I know that met John Lennon, and he is somebody that, I think it was even Paul McCartney said, who is of himself larger than life, like, John didn't become a deity until he was murdered.
Right.
And people forget of the when the Beatles broke up in those initial early 70s, John had the least amount of commercial success of the four of them. George Harrison had the biggest hits.
Well, no, money-wise, because Lennon and McCartney got all the public.
Oh, no, I just introduced like solo albums. Like George Harrison's solo work was played a lot more on the radio than Lennon's for the first half of the 70s.
He went solo, right.
Yeah, Imagine was a big album, and Mind Games was a hit, but like Sometime in New York City didn't do any business. And
I was prone for the Yoko screaming things.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yes, I have.
That's you want to test out your stereo.
Yeah. It's an acquired, like so many things, it's an acquired taste. But
I'm waiting to acquire it,
but tell the story of how you of when you met him and the project that you guys were going to do, because it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, well, I at Janus Films, they owned certain titles, and one of them was King Kong, and my marching orders was to make something other than just putting the movies out. They don't need me. They're going to book the movies to TV and colleges, whatever. And I thought King Kong would be a good idea for a Broadway show. What do I know about Broadway shows? Zero. But
there's a technical glitch.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, at that point in time, probably the only musical I went to was Mary Martin in Peter Pan. So I checked out on Broadway shows, but that's a qualification. It's not nothing. And
as they say, every president has never been the president until they're the president. So you got to do it.
You're just underlying my point. So I said a Broadway show. The movie doesn't need to be remade because it was made. What are you going to do? You can do it in color with special effects. It's the same movie. But take it to a Broadway show, and you don't have to show you can't possibly show a giant King Kong, but you show his foot. And I had this idea with two agents at William Morris want to go to Club Med. I didn't put this in the book, but that was the thing I pitched to John Lennon. Anyway, I went to a charity event that my father threw for Armored Erdogan, and I didn't even know who he was until I went there. And like everybody, Armored Erdogan?
But tell for the people.
Atlantic Records.
Yeah, he's a huge music industry. Yeah,
he was but he was the musicians guy. Musicians, all the artists loved him because he was a hip. He was on their side. He wasn't like a suit.
He was like a studio. It was like he was like if Martin Scorsese ran a movie studio. Like he was. Yeah.
Right.
And who was your dad? How did your dad know Ahmet Erdogan?
No, because Irv Lieberman would be do these big charity events. And as a matter of fact, when I was a kid, he did the first national telethon with Dean Martin and Barry Gray. That was how I connected with Barry Gray. And it was for the City of Hope.
Okay.
And he did the first rock and roll arena rock and roll show ever in the Island Garden Arena in 1959. And it was headlined by, who was the number one vocalist in 1959? Quick.
The number one vocalist?
Male vocalist.
Boy.
Lloyd Price.
Oh, I wasn't going to say that.
Yeah, Lloyd Price. And the female vocalist, number one?
Doris Day?
Connie Francis.
So
he had Jimmy Clanton. He had Santo and Johnny.
Santo and Johnny.
Yeah. What was it called? Moonwalk or Sleepwalk or, so he would run these things at the Island Garden Arena. Actually, Sid Bernstein, I saw him at the Friars Club and he was like old and in the wheelchair and everything. I went over to him and I said, Sid Bernstein Presents was what the Beatles, they brought in.
Right.
Thing. And I didn't know him. And I said, do you remember Irving Lieberman? He said, yeah, sure. How's he doing? I said, well, he died. It was my father. He goes, oh, I'm sorry to hear. It was like way before this. But I said, do you remember the Island Garden thing? If my father didn't die of a heart attack at 55, you wouldn't be Sid Bernstein. Because he was the first one to do this. And he fucking agreed. He goes, I could see that.
Oh, wow.
He was the first amazing. Because, no, even if he's jerking me off, the fact of the matter is there's some truth to it. Because before that, all the rock and roll shows were at theaters. Alan Freed, the Paramount.
Sure.
My father put in an arena, which was and that's what, exploded the whole thing from there on. So
That's true.
So I take credit because he's not around.
As well you should. So you're at this thing and you meet
John Lennon.
And you pitch him King Kong the musical, and he's into it.
Yeah, I pitched him. It just occurred to me. I said, John, do you know what King Kong is all about? And he says, certainly. It was the white man's fear of the black man. Boom. I went, exactly. And then we went into this whole thing, and he was totally into it.
And then, but what I love about the story is you thought, which anyone think like, as you're talking to him, like you're saying, I shouldn't be bothering this guy. I shouldn't be bothering.
Well,
this guy.
He had, Mona Lisa. That kind of. He had that. I used to have a teacher in the School of Visual Arts, an art teacher, Frank Viner. He's a pop artist, pretty well known in New York, and he would have this kind of smirky grin while you're talking, and you're thinking, is he with me or is he goofing on me? And you couldn't put your finger on. That's what John Lennon did.
Right.
But I figured, what am I going to, hey, John, cut the shit. I'm just going to go with it. And what choice do I have? But he had this.
But you pitched him, and then you walked away not knowing. But then you get a call like 2 days later. He wants to meet.
I got a call like 2 a.m. that night that he's going to meet me at Danny's Hideaway with his lawyer. So he was totally into it. And then the next day, I find out from the boss at Janus Films that, well, we have the rights. We don't have the rights to do this. We have the rights to distribute it like all the things they're already doing. So where's the mining gold coming? So now that I mine gold, he's got to find out to get the rights from General Tires, who owned RKO at the time, to do a Broadway show. And if we could, we would have gotten this thing financed in one day.
It was going to be John Lennon and Stevie Wonder writing the music for.
Right. I said to him, this is my pitch. I say, John, you do all the white music in the movie, like the two William Morris guys, the guys that bring over King Kong. And then Stevie does the jungle thing and he's the sound of King Kong, and he was doing that, face thing, but he was into it. He dug it.
That is, yeah. But he is one of those guys that, he was just a guy. He was a very successful guy. And he was interested. Maybe that might work. I don't know.
They all are, if you just, I think that celebrities is like I've seen so many celebrities and it's like, they'll meet you. It's the way it's like the onus is on you, how you come off. If you come off like, and they're going to act like a celebrity, Right. It's just an instinctive thing. But I don't have that in my DNA. So it's like, he's John Lennon. That's what he does for a living. I don't know if he eats his cat or I don't know anything about him. So that vibe instantly, I've always found throughout my life, even a guy like you're huge to me.
Oh,
no, you think?
Okay. Well, I'm flattered because comedy. So that's flattering to me.
I know comedy and that's really a pretentious. I mean, how can I do, but I really do.
Well, but seriously, it's a great piece of work. And you have to know what you're doing to do it.
What?
You would have to know what you were doing to make that piece.
Oh, but seriously, that was, people come up to me and say, what's your favorite thing you ever did in the movie? And they figure I'm going to go Squirm or this and that. And I say, but seriously.
Yeah, which is a good,
in other words,
which people can still see. We're jumping around, but it's a documentary basically about the origins and the evolution of satire in comedy in American.
Well, it's actually what the pitch was. My pitch to Rob Reiner was like the news, and the news today is a whole other thing, but news in general is telling you one thing, and the politically and socially oriented stand-up comedians is saying something else that in 2020 hindsight, we all accept as the truth. Not what the news said, but what they said. But at the time, it was the Vietnam War and all these things. I always got my news from those guys.
Right.
Me,
sure.
Right. And I said, fuck, because I was looking at it from their point of view. So I said, how do you prove that? Well, you start in 1960 because you have to have footage. And we went up to 1993 and showed the news and then what the comics reacted to that event and that subject. And we did it over and over all the way to the present, which was 1993.
Right.
And I was in 2 years ago, I was in Scotland and Edinburgh. Edinburgh? How do you say it?
Yeah. Edinburgh is how it's pronounced.
Yeah, it's a borough of Manhattan. Right. And I was the guest of honor and showing my movies. A guy comes up and he's a Scotsman, and he says, Mr. Leiberman, I came all the way from Hoofden, wherever. And he says, I wanted to meet you. He says, because one of your movies has just changed my life. And I'm with the director of the festival, and she's thinking, well, here we go with like Just Before Dawn. He says, but seriously. He saw it on Channel 4. It played in England forever, Channel 4. And it blew me away. And I just like, wow. I mean, that's a compliment to me. Because It was the closest, when you do a movie, you get all these ideas. If it's your movie and you thought of it, it's going to lose in the translation. The whole assignment is don't let it go down the toilet completely,
Right.
salvage something of your original idea. That's the closest thing to what I envision.
But
It had all to do with having enough money, basically.
They're true tales from Weirdsville. Tales from Weirdsville. And they're true.
Can your heart stand the shocking facts?
As someone who lives and works in the catch-all euphemism that is Hollywood, I am frequently asked if I eat babies, or if I know anyone who eats babies, or if I know Tom Hanks. He surely eats babies. And here's the thing. We all laugh at this, but there are people who really believe this stuff. And I'm not just talking about people who live under bridges and argue with their shadows and wander the streets looking like the cover of the Aqualung album. Real people with cars and homes believe this. So you wonder, where did this start? Here's the thing. The insanity that is QAnon and all that stuff, it's hundreds of years old. It's just been updated and repurposed for modern day use. The origin of the modern-day movie stars eat babies belief system can be traced to a very specific digital sewer called 4chan. 4chan is what is known as an image board, which is basically a message board with images. And it was started in 2003 by a guy named Christopher Poole. It was originally intended to be an English language counterpart to a Japanese image board called the Fotuba channel, and its main focus was a place for people to gather and discuss manga and anime, which sounds pretty harmless and fun. I'd be a part of that. I like anime. Now, there's a whole rabbit hole into the world involving 4chan, and you are welcome to investigate it if you're curious. But the very, very short story is 4chan was largely unregulated and soon became a haven for racist content and alt-right bullshit, helping give the world Gamergate, which was essentially an organized harassment campaign of several prominent women in the gaming industry. No need for Freud here. And a host of other festering boils that clustered along the ass of progress in the past few years. To pin a specific date to the birth of the modern-day current conspiracy theory that is QAnon, let's go to the fall of 2016. Now, we are in the high dudgeon of the Hillary Clinton-Donald Trump presidential campaign. And there's bad news for the Trump campaign. The Access Hollywood tape has leaked, with the Republican candidate speaking in, let's say, a less than respectful manner regarding women. And for a brief moment, it looks like it might be all over for the famed short-fingered vulgarian from Spy Magazine's heyday. Not even Mike Pence will speak to him. However, earlier, John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign chair, had his emails hacked by Russian hackers. They then fed these emails to Julian Assange at WikiLeaks, and they are sitting on these emails for just the right moment. Well, it arrives. The Access Hollywood tape is leaked. Trump associate Roger Stone springs into action and immediately contacts a guy named Jerome Corsi. Now, none of this stuff is up for dispute. This is all just factual. Jerome Corsi is in touch with Julian Assange. Stone's message for Assange through Corsi is simple. Dump the John Podesta emails. They want to, quote, balance the news cycle so it's not all about the Access Hollywood tape. And so, and this is easily proven, 1 hour after the Access Hollywood story breaks, WikiLeaks dumps the John Podesta emails, and the Access Hollywood story is knocked out of the headlines. Now, There wasn't anything extraordinarily shocking about the John Podesta emails, as far as sane people are concerned. But pro-Trump groups on Reddit and 4chan dissected them looking for dirt. Well, they didn't come up with much. But one person on 4chan focused on, now get ready for this, dinner plans. Dinner plans between John Podesta and his brother Tony. I know. And in these dinner plans, the two men discussed getting a, quote, cheese pizza, end quote. This particular poster at 4chan noted that pedophiles use the abbreviation CP to mean child pornography. So cheese pizza can only be code for child pornography. This really happened. According to posters on 4chan, the following terms were all code. Hot dog meant boy, pizza meant girl, cheese meant underaged girl, pasta meant underaged boy, ice cream meant male prostitute, walnut meant a person of color, sauce meant an orgy. So God help you if you were ever discussing a meal online. Again, all of this stuff really happened. The emails also reveal that John Podesta had some exchanges with a businessman and Democratic donor in Washington, D.C. named James Alefantos. This is all normal. Democratic operatives often speak with high-level Democratic donors. John Alefantos happened to, among other things, own a Washington, D.C. pizza restaurant called Comet Ping Pong. Pizza restaurants serve cheese pizza. So this can mean only one thing. Turn this loose on the internet fever swamp and this is what you get. The basement of Comet Ping Pong is the nexus of an elaborate system of tunnels running underneath Washington, D.C. that connect it with other businesses where an elite cabal of anyone the particular reader disagrees with perform unholy acts of pedophilia and murder. Pretty harmless lunacy, you say, if you just keep it on the internet. Au contraire. On December 4th, Edgar Welch, a 28-year-old man from South Carolina, showed up at Comet Ping Pong with a couple guns and the goal of freeing all of Hillary's child slaves that were kept in the basement. Fun fact, there were no child slaves in the basement. In fact, the building didn't have a basement. Now you ask, was this enough to put this ridiculous story to rest? No! That's the beauty of conspiracy theories. It's like watching a soap opera, if you've ever gotten into a soap opera. The big reveal is always promised for the end of every week. But when the big reveal comes, it's never the reveal. It's always a bait and switch to another, bigger mystery that will be revealed next week, and that keeps you coming back. The fact that it was widely reported in the media that there were no child slaves in the non-existent basement of Comet Ping Pong proved only one thing. The media was clearly in on it. In October of 2017, someone began posting on 4chan under the title Q Clearance Patriot. Q Clearance is a real thing and it is part of the Department of Energy. But within a month, Q Clearance Patriots postings were amplified on Twitter by Russian-based Twitter accounts. Now, just prior to this, President Trump had held a meeting with a group of top military commanders. It was an average and uneventful meeting, common between top military commanders and the president, who is, in fact, the commander-in-chief of the military. But a reporter asked him what the meeting was about, and instead of saying, nothing, just routine, he said, I don't know. Maybe it's the calm before the storm. Why did he say that? Because Donald Trump is a man-child unfit for the office he held. That said, Q, who immediately began posting about, quote, the storm, unquote. What was the storm? According to 4chan users, it was an imminent, widespread series of arrests of the cabal of child-eating pedophiles that were secretly running the country that Donald Trump was fighting. This story was then amplified not only by Russian-backed Twitter accounts, but also by moderators on 4chan, who found a way to profit financially from all of the attention and were interested in increasing it. This then spread to YouTube. By the early months of 2018, the conspiracy moved into the mainstream, with mentions from Sean Hannity and Roseanne Barr. Alex Jones claimed to be in personal contact with Q. Then a whole bunch of Q devotees began showing up at Trump rallies, starting in, let's all say it together, Florida. The Q cult has very heavy religious overtones and vibes, and it has spread globally like a religious movement. To be a part of it, you have to be down with the central tenet of the QAnon belief system, which is that Donald Trump was elected by God to fight a global network of Satan-worshipping, child-eating pedophiles who are in charge of everything. And the only way we know about this is because a guy named Q posts about it on a former anime message board. Because QAnon was started by right-wingers, remember this traces back to the John Podesta email dump, which was released to distract from the Access Hollywood tape, the focus of the Satan-worshipping pedophile cannibal cult was always Democrats and their supporters in Hollywood and the media. Of course, QAnon is also a product of Hollywood. Donald Trump owes his popularity to a Hollywood TV show, The Apprentice, and QAnon's motto, "Where we go one, we go all," is stolen from a Hollywood movie. Ridley Scott's 1996 sailing movie White Squall. The line is in the trailer, for Christ's sakes.
Where we go one, we go all.
One of the celebrities often targeted by QAnon supporters is Tom Hanks. It's obvious. Who is less likely to be a Satan-worshipping pedophile cannibal than Tom Hanks? This is a great trick provocateurs do. They take something obvious, and then they force you to argue it. They automatically win, not because they have a point, but because suddenly you are arguing. It's not that Tom Hanks isn't a Satan-worshipping child molester. It's the fact that they've put that argument on the menu, and that's their victory. Ben Shapiro does this for a living. He is the digital equivalent of the guy who shows up at the party and makes a big announcement that, actually, the Beatles are the worst rock group of all time. Or, actually, puppies are the least cute thing in the world. They've won the argument the minute you argue with them because they've taken something that's not an argument and made it an argument. If you don't believe me, just look up at the bright green sky. And, like a religion, QAnon is built on promises of apocalyptic events that never happen. And no, that doesn't disprove the theory. That just proves that the mystery is more complex than we were led to believe. Keep tuning in. The Lord moves in mysterious ways. The fact that Trump lost is proof that God made him president so he could do this thing he didn't do. Among the long list of QAnon's broken promises are The Storm, the series of mass arrests of the satanic pedophile cabal that secretly rules the world, which is made up of thousands of prominent Democratic politicians, media elite, and celebrities. These arrests would lead to a massive series of military tribunals, which would then lead to a global cultural cleansing and renaissance known as the Great Awakening. This was destined to take place on November 3rd, 2017. It didn't happen. It was then rescheduled for Joe Biden's inauguration, January 20th, 2021. It didn't happen. A major event involving the Department of Defense would take place on February 1st, 2018. It didn't happen. People targeted by President Trump would commit mass suicide on February 10th, 2018. It didn't happen. There would be a car bombing in London on February 16th, 2018. It didn't happen. The Trump military parade would never be forgotten. The parade was canceled. There would be a bombshell revelation about North Korea in May of 2018. It didn't happen. A smoking gun video of Hillary Clinton would emerge in March of 2018. It didn't happen. John McCain, when still alive, would resign from the Senate. Mark Zuckerberg would resign from Facebook. Jack Dorsey would resign from Twitter. The Pope would be arrested. Trump would be reelected. Didn't happen. Didn't happen. Didn't happen. Didn't happen. Didn't happen. Even though Trump wasn't reelected, it didn't matter. He would be inaugurated again on March 4th, 2021. Didn't happen. March 20th, 2021. Didn't happen. You get the point. But allow me, please, one last thing. All of this stuff is very, very old, racist, anti-Semitic bullshit dressed up in brand new, bright red baseball hats. Many of QAnon's more high-profile devotees and boosters have a wink-wink, nudge-nudge support of anti-Semitic screeds like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion and your granddad's old conspiracy theories involving the Rothschild family. They also believe that Hollywood elites are engaging in adrenochrome harvesting. Now, what is adrenochrome? According to the conspiracy, adrenochrome is adrenalized blood drawn from terrified children. That's what Hillary Clinton does to them in the basement of Comet Ping Pong. And then this blood is ingested, which allows Hillary Clinton and Tom Hanks to live forever and have the power to jump over buildings. In reality, I know, boo, adrenochrome is real. It is a compound formed by the oxidation of adrenaline, and its main medical use is to promote the clotting of blood in open wounds. So what's with the eating of babies? We'll go on to Google and look up blood libel, dating back to around the year 1144. See, in early Christianity, there was the belief that, guess who? The Jews murdered babies and drank their blood for the purposes of dark arts that were performed in their mysterious religious ceremonies. All of this stuff is old, rehashed, anti-Semitic, superstitious bullshit fervently believed by morons who want to feel that they're in on something, that they're part of something. Well, you are. In September of 2020, Gregory Stanton of the Genocide Watch declared that QAnon was simply a Nazi cult rebranded for the 21st century. Congratulations. You're a part of something.
And now, on with the show.
What is amazing about your career, and it's funny because your career, you as a filmmaker, you remind me, Bobcat Goldthwait reminds me of you in the sense that his work as a filmmaker is that he's not tied to a genre. Like your big movie that broke you through after Ringer, which was a short, was Squirm,
right,
which came out after Jaws, when we need nature attacks movies, and you thought worms. And I remember I had the issue of Famous Monsters that covered Squirm.
Yeah.
Remember when it came out? And
actually, it was in the first issue of Fangoria.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah, they covered Squirm. Yeah,
and you could have just been a horror director,
right,
for the rest of your life,
right?
But you made this great documentary about stand-up comedy called "But Seriously." You worked on was it Sonny Liston? Was that the
right? Yeah,
yeah. You made a documentary about Sonny Liston.
Right.
You were, that you're not tied to a genre, that you're intellectually curious, and that you just follow whatever interests you at the time. I think that's admirable. Did you find that did that hurt you professionally because you weren't like, he's a horror director? No,
I wouldn't even say it hurt me financially, big time. I mean, if I said all I want to do is movies with special effects, to say like Friday the 13th, watch this. We can put a hatchet in a girl's forehead. and they're going to put that in the trailer, and we can, kill. Well, what's the storyline? It's got a story. They're in the wood. Oh, well, who's the girl that gets the thing? She has it coming. She's looking for a cat. She's stupid. Those movies, I could do them, grind them out like 5, but I would have stayed in advertising. I would have made more money just making commercials. That's the way I look at those things.
Yeah.
It's not.
And advertising is where the real money is. Right.
The term for me is they don't need me to make Friday the 13th. You know what I'm saying? That's the way I look at it. And I have no interest in it. So if you say, well, you do it for money, okay, great. But I could make commercials and make more money.
Right. Yeah. And I know a lot of guys that have made movies. They're commercial directors. They make a movie and they could make another movie, but they go back to commercials because it's more money at the end of the day. It's more money and much less of a pain in the ass.
And then on top of it, I could write commercials. I have a natural, if I had anything that was a natural gift, besides drawing, is writing advertising.
Well, you came up with, when the movie Tommy came out in 1975, you did that ad campaign, which was your senses will never be the same.
Right.
And that's all it is.
Tommy, period. The movie. Your senses will never be the same. And they use that across the board. Scott Muni.
Yeah.
I remember Tommy, the movie. Remember Scott Muni?
I do.
Yeah.
And but that's what advertising does. I met somebody whose dad was in advertising and they just said, my dad wrote Choosy Mothers Choose Jiff. It's just 4 words, but it's ubiquitous. Everybody knows what it means.
Yeah, no, that would come natural to me if I did that. And then I could shoot them. Like there were art guys that used to write and shoot their own commercials.
Yeah.
That's what I would have done if I just wanted to make money. So I decided, so what can I do that I don't make money? And, and I was brilliant. No, I made money in spite of, I never tried to make a lot of money. That's what I'm saying.
Right. Tell us, people, you're not going to get out of this interview without talking about Squirm. So let's talk a little bit about Squirm and talk a little bit about remote control. And then I want to talk a little bit about Jennings Lang. And then but so you're writing, you're working in film, you're in New York, it's the 70s. It's before Jaws, but you get this idea for worms that get struck by lightning.
Yeah. Well, no. Yes and no. Maybe. It's a maybe. No, what happened was...
F. Scott Fitzgerald had this idea about the corruption of wealth. You had this idea about worms that get struck by lightning.
When I was 10, my brother, who was almost 2 years older than me, and he was really into science stuff. And he actually, I always thank him for the fact that, I had Einstein as the older brother. He's got me into a lifetime. He became a doctor, know. But as far as science, I've always been fascinated with science. I always did great at school in science. And he read in Popular Mechanics that you can get the worms if you want to go fishing. You go fishing in a lake and you get night crawlers, whatever.
Yeah, we would call it, because you're from New York.
Long Island.
In Long Island. I'm from Massachusetts.
Right.
We would go and it would be called night crawling.
Right.
We're going out to get worms at night.
Right. So, but the thing is that he read that if you take your Lionel train transformer, remember with the red and black, and you hook up the two poles to a metal rod, you put the rod into muddy ground, you wet it all down, and then you zap them with the whistle, because the whistle ups the amperage, the worms will come out of the ground. And I went, and we had one of these overground pools, that you take down in the winter. So it had this big circle of mud, and we had a light, a pool light. So, okay, you ready? And he zapped them, and then I put on the pool light, and it was like, when you're 10 years old, there was probably 200 worms. But in my mind, there were 200 million, because they were jumping up, and it was freaked me out. And so that's the true story part. But when it came to the early 70s, I'm not sure to this day that maybe LSD, having done acid, it's like you take that experience and you add 2 parts acid to that experience and you come up with Squirm. Because that's what I did. I just amplified what was in my mind into a movie. That's the only way I could put it.
Right. No, it's as best it couldn't be a more clear example. But what is amazing is that movie got made, and that movie is great. And I remember it as part of the aftermath of Jaws, where
Right.
if it was, but was it greenlit before Jaws? Because it came out.
As a matter of fact, Jaws had nothing to do with it. As a matter of fact,
That's what I mean. It was. I think of it as, because then there was Grizzly.
No, people say, well, when you do anything, and this even in doing comedy, everybody has to group after the fact. They have to give labels and group. So it was part of the nature run amok cycle. Like with these idiot
frogs
writers that write this shit. Well, nobody said, hey, let's do a nature run amok movie. I certainly never heard that term until there was enough of them that you put together. But the impetus, the reason that this happened is Edgar Lansbury and Joe Beru were big, successful Broadway producers. And when they took a show called The Magic Show from Canada, this young producer of The Magic Show named Ivan Reichman came down to New York because he's going to be a partner in The Magic Show in New York. He had done a movie with a guy named Cronenberg in 70. It was called Shivers.
Right.
Ivan did. And they took it to Cannes. And they made back their money, like say it was $300,000 in those days, which is $3 million today probably. Right. But they took it to Cannes and they made back their money. So it was that business model that Edgar and Joe said, hey, we got all this money. We're coming in on Godspell and The Magic Show. Let's do that. Let's look for a script that we can make now, like right now. So if it's May of this year, we're going to have it in Cannes next March. That was the template, right? Okay. And then fill in the movie.
Right. It's very much like in Ed Wood. What's it called? It opens in 6 weeks in Tulsa.
and so it's funny that it was almost like, when you work for television, you have an air date. So you're working like,
and backwards engineering.
Like February 3rd in the TV Guide, it's going to be on at 8:00. That's basically what they told me, that this movie that you can do. But they read my script and they bought it immediately. And but that's how it came about. It had nothing to do with Jaws. It had everything to do with Shivers. And that's exactly what they did. They brought it to Cannes, and it was the biggest hit, not in competition, but in the market, the Cannes market. They got back the whole investment there. So Sam Markoff swooped in and said, hey, guys, even though you made all these deals, I can kill all these deals. I want it for the world. And so he took it, AIP took it for the world. After that, and then it became MGM, and
right.
So that was my first. I said, "Oh, this is easy."
Yeah, but it happened to come out right. Yeah, because it was 76. It came out, so it was it was in production when Jaws was coming. All the Jaws ripoffs came out in 77, 78, because people started to have the idea in the fall of 75.
The way it works, like, at a certain point a long time ago, I said, whatever, like the kids always go, whatever. I did this movie just before dawn, right? Now I'm shooting it. They see, it came out in 1980 or 81. So he drew from Texas Chainsaw Murders and it's Hills Have Eyes. In the world according to them.
Right.
Now, in reality, to this day, I haven't seen either movie ever, right? And the Hills of Eyes I never had an interest to see, but Chainsaw I intentionally didn't see for the reason that I could make a claim. Lieberman claims you never saw. I don't believe it. Like no, I'm lying, right?
Yeah.
But so I got to a point where my wife said, "Well, you can see it now. I mean, if you're curious, I have a print of it." I said, "Yeah, but then I can't like say specifically. I never." Now I have to get an asterisk. Well, I didn't see it for like 27 years, and then I saw it. It's cleaner if I never see it. And I went to a screening at Universal, and Toby Hooper, I never even met him. And then we went to a party afterwards, and it was great to finally, meet each other, these horror guys. And he said to me, "Is it true you never saw Chainsaw?" I said, "Absolutely." And I'm sure it's great, but I'm not going to see it.
I had a show on IFC called Stand Against Evil that was a horror comedy show, and people said it was a ripoff of Ash versus the Evil Dead, and which it was not. The premise of the show was, what if instead of David Duchovny in the X-Files, Gillian Anderson was partnered with my dad? That was the entire joke,
right?
And that was this, and then. The title, I was coming up with the title, and I found that Stand Against Evil was good. So I said, I literally changed the name of the character to fit the title. Like, right. But then I was like, well, people say it was a ripoff of Ash. And then I realized later, no, if I was ripping off Ash versus Evil Dead, I wouldn't have given it a title so fucking similar to Ash versus Evil Dead. I'm a better liar than that.
It's so much easier for people to like say, I know where he got that idea, because they can't conceive of getting a fucking original idea. If you could, you'd have original ideas.
Yeah. It's like if I was gonna be lying, I would lie, and you would never know.
Yeah, of course. So anyway, what got us on that? Oh yeah, Squirm. So
Squirm.
I did above Squirm. I actually, the format of Squirm is kind of like my inspiration is one movie. See, in that time, and this is an interesting thing. Up to like the 70s, we couldn't rip off anything because there's nothing to rip off.
Right.
So later generations ripped us off because there was something to rip off. Mm-hmm. But like The Kids in the Woods, there's 8,000 of those movies. Well, I happened to make Just Before Dawn when there wasn't. I wasn't but I was ripping off Deliverance, which wasn't a horror movie.
Right. Exactly. You just take that premise and put a horror movie into it.
So, but it wasn't. Like you couldn't have it. You don't have a whole wealth like you have today with the 8,000 zombie movies and 8,000, alien movies and all that, and vampire movies. There wasn't you'd have to go back to the 30s or the 50s sci-fi movies to do it. Now, I was very heavily influenced by the 50s sci-fi, and that, hey, Worms, you want to do something. This is a cool thing. WPIX in New York used to show Squirm all the time in black and white.
Oh, it's like a 50s movie in black and white.
They made a mistake. No, they didn't. They always showed it. One night, they showed it in black and white. And I'm watching this and going, this is fucking great. It like smooths over all the low budgetness of it, which all 50s. Right.
Well, that's why Night of the Living Dead was in black and white.
Were right. And but the special effects and which ones are real worms and which ones are fake worms. And it was like, I called up the station to find out how come it was in black and white. And in those days, they showed a lot of black and white movies still on TV. And the night guy forgot to flip over to color. It's that simple. And I would, on my DVD, when it first came out on DVD, and I did a thing on MGM, the commentary, I said, take your TV and flip it all the way, take all the color out and watch the movie that way. And if you can, like now with a smart TV, if you can put it in subtitles, like find Japanese, like because I've seen it where Don Scardino is speaking a different language, but not in black and white. And it becomes like the movie I would always love.
Right, you totally understand. Somebody did this on YouTube, and it's, speaking of Rod Serling, someone did this on YouTube, and it's brilliant. They took Planet of the Apes, made it black and white, cut it down to 25 minutes, and put Rod Serling narration at the beginning of the end, because he did episodes that were similar enough in the premise, and he wrote the screenplays to that as well. And it's just, I mean, it has always been like, people say Twilight Zone, the movie, was made in 1983. No, it was made in 1968. It was Planet of the Apes. That's Twilight Zone, the movie. It's just a giant episode of the Twilight Zone. But this person actually cut it into a half an hour block, and it's perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah.
But talk about a movie that was also influenced by sci-fi in the 50s, but also ahead of its, and Remote Control is, I think, is really ahead of its time as a film. Yeah.
It's funny that the literal term "ahead of its time," it was, it was on its time to its detriment, because I made it in 1987. That was the height of the video explosion, revolution, invasion, which is how the word came to me. But people saw it at that time and go, wait, because it was very exaggerated, and I did it very stylized. But they said, come on, nobody wears their hair like that, or the fashions, that's too extreme. So they took it way too literally at the time. As the years went on, and there's no more video stores, and this whole generation grew up spending half their life in video stores, like Quentin Tarantino. You know what I mean? And this becomes this. So now the exaggeration works to its advantage, because it's exemplary of the 80s, what was going on in the 80s, and they don't take it literally. That movie is exactly 11 and 7/16 more famous now than it was then.
Well, have you ever heard of Slashback Video?
No.
It's an art installation that travels around, and it is an 80s video store.
Really?
Specializing in horror movies, but you go into it and it is like a time machine. It's like you're in a video store in the 80s.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really exciting. But it's strange, because to be in something that is a recreation. I worked at a drive-in in high school that's still going. It's now, at the time it was called the Milford Drive-In. Now it's called a snack bar and ticket, whatever. You did everything except projectionist, but I did carry the copper rods up. You do a little bit of everything, and it's still going. Now it's called the Mendon Twin in Mendon, Massachusetts.
You know that they don't have those speaker things anymore?
No, it's all your car. Yeah. But I have one in the house.
You know how cool that is? Oh, you have the speaker thing?
Yeah.
But you know what's cool is that there's I did it at least twice. It was someplace in Pennsylvania, Mohonk Drive.
Yes.
They show all this. So they had.
I emailed the guy from that drive-in last night, and that's not a lie.
Oh, you know what they're doing now? All 5
Planet of the Apes movies.
Planet of the Apes.
That's why he emailed me.
Harry Guerrero.
Yeah. Harry, I emailed him this morning. I emailed with him this morning.
Funny. Yeah, Harry. So Harry had me out there at least twice. So when they showed Squirm, somebody came over to me and said,
"That's so funny. What a small world.
Would you like to introduce Squirm?" I said, what am I going to do? Go out in front of the screen and do like shtick? I could do the dog on the screen. Like, what do you mean introduce? He goes, no. Oh, all right. Anyway, so I said, he says, no, you can get on a microphone.
Yeah.
And we plug right into the FM of their speakers.
Yeah.
I went, hold it. You mean to say I could talk to them like DJs on the radio? Yeah. Done. I go to the thing and I introduced, I'm here and I'm talking to everybody in this
it's great.
place that was packed. All these, and they had the windows down so you could hear them inside,
Yeah.
And I said, I never know what I'm going to say. Like, you can see that now. I never know until I say it. And I said, out here in the drive-in, I said, and I talked about Squirm. It's the first time I've ever seen it in drive-in, even though it played all through the South back in the day and everything. I said, so no more talking. Get out your condoms. I said, get out your condoms and get ready for the show. And I heard big laughs coming from the cars.
Yeah.
And then my wife said, what did you say? I didn't say that. But it was great to see the movie in its home
environment. Very briefly about the reason is when I go back to Massachusetts, I take my kids to that drive-in. When I go in that snack bar, it is like a time machine because it's very, very similar to what it was in 1981 and 82 when I worked there. And it is creepy and thrilling to be like, it's so like what it was.
It's the same hot dogs as they get you.
It's still there, yeah.
Those school, It's like, well, it's the shape of the hot dog.
They wanted Dr. Z, the Dr. Zayas thing that I do to introduce the Apes movies, but it's the weekend I'm taking my daughter to college, so I couldn't do it. But otherwise, I would have done it. I would have done it.
And I would have gotten in the car and gone there if you would have done that.
Yeah,
but
I would have done it.
How would you do it, even if you did it? How would
I think I would have either literally gone in front of the screen or would have filmed it or something. Whatever he wanted to do, it was worth it to me. Just to be able to see those on a drive-in screen again, which is really where they played at the time. They were drive-in movies.
Yeah.
I love that. There's a drive-in out here that I go to a lot. Here in Southern California, that's pretty great. And with COVID, they're coming back, which is the only good thing that has come from COVID. Well,
there is one thing that came. I'm stealing this. Beyond bat, it looks like bat, it tastes like bat, but it's not a bat. So you totally say. That's Norm Macdonald in the height of everybody's going crazy.
Yeah,
Norm Macdonald. He actually was talking to Roseanne. I was watching some podcasts or something, and he said with a straight face, "You want to invest in, because Beyond Meat was getting you Beyond Bat. It looks like bat, tastes like bat, but it's not a bat. It's safe."
I have been to Wuhan, and it is the filthiest fucking place I've ever been in my life. It does not surprise me. It does not surprise me.
You have a certain glow about you. I couldn't put my finger on it. And now I don't want to put my finger on it.
Yeah. No, Wuhan is Times Square in 1984, but the entire city. Now add chickens and you've got Wuhan.
You know what I don't understand? It's like you got this virus, right? Now, if you say, well, there is a lab that does this exact same thing, but they're in Mozambique, or they're on the North Pole. You go, what a coincidence. No, it's like the next block of where this broke out, right? Yeah. Nope, didn't come from that. No way, no how.
Yeah.
There's going to be 8,000 kind of updated, it's now too soon. I guarantee you, well, there's been a lot of movies with Dustin Hoffman, all those
Outbreak and
movies.
I don't see, like, everybody watched Pandemic at the beginning of the pandemic, but now I don't know how, like, Pandemic and Idiocracy are both documentaries now. I mean, they're not even fiction anymore.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah. Before we go, I wanted to talk about Jennings Lang, who's a really interesting character, because there's a podcast coming out. I forget the name of the actress is playing Joan Bennett, and John Hamm is playing Walter Wanger. And Karina Longworth is producing the podcast. It's a like a fiction. It's a story. It's a narrative podcast story about these two people. And Joan Bennett, the very famous actress, was married to Walter Wanger, and then she had an affair with a guy named Jennings Lang, and then Walter Wanger shot Jennings Lang
in the Wanger.
Of all the weird places for a guy named Wanger to shoot you,
Shot him
What
right
are
in
the
garage.
odds? What are the odds?
But it didn't actually. What people heard happened didn't happen. But
he missed.
Excuse me. But Jennings Lang, Walter Wanger only did like a month at a honor farm because he was rich and it was the 50s and he was a rich white guy in the 50s.
But he didn't hit the bullseye. See?
No, he didn't. He missed.
He just hit his thigh.
Yeah, but and because Walter Wanger was rich and white and it was the 50s, he didn't really have to go to jail for attempted murder. He did like a week at an honor farm.
Well, Jennings was rich and white.
Yeah, but Jennings didn't do anything illegal. He just stripped the guy's wife.
Right, but it was a consensual situation.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. He certainly paid the price.
Listen.
Yeah, but Jennings Lang went on to have a great career, and you worked with him a lot. That's a really interesting.
He was like, there's certain guys that I'm so thankful that and they always say to me the same words. They say, Lieberman, you're a quick study. I pick things up really quick. You know why? Because because I know I'm with somebody that knows 1,000 times more than me about so many things I'm interested in.
Right.
Otherwise, I talk too much. It's like that switches off, But when I'm with these people, it's like I suck it in the first take, So that's what makes me a quick study. And Jennings, to say that certain movies, it's an entertainment. Did you ever hear that term?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I never heard it back then. I'm thinking, well, isn't this the entertainment business? And every movie is. No, if you do like, Schindler's List, that ain't an entertainment, even though it can gross $100 million. You do Jaws, it's an entertainment.
Right.
And these guys saw it was old school and they were right about everything. I mean, it's like, it all broken down.
And the way they approach films, it is a business and they really do see it as product. The last thing I wanted to talk about was it's a very interesting story that you closed the book on that really caught me off guard. Where you talk about having a meeting with early 70s meeting with Buddy Mora, who was at Rollins Joffe and the old showbiz management days.
Joffe.
Yeah, who managed Woody Allen and at the time was early Woody Allen when he was he was a deity. Yeah, he was a deity before his fall from grace. And they had a meeting with you. And it's one of the things that you said you really kicked yourself about because they asked you what you wanted to do.
And it's not even a kicking myself. I didn't even kick myself then. It's like retroactive kicking. Can you do that?
Yeah. We've all done it. Yeah.
Retroactive kicking. Then. So I didn't say. First of all, I really, in my defense, I really didn't. I knew we had Woody Allen. I really didn't know these guys were the guys.
Mm-hmm.
Like every comic, Billy Crystal, Robin Williams, everybody said these are the managers. They were the Armored Erdogan's of comedy.
Right. Well put. Yeah.
They knew, and
they were the pros from Dover.
I didn't know that. So then you'd say, well, then you were really a schmuck if they thought that I was so clever and all of that. But can I blame it on the bossa nova? Am I allowed to? What's the statute of limitations on the bossa nova?
It's gone.
It's like, that's why the name of the thing is regrets. It's a regret,
Yeah.
I regret it. And just to find out what would happen, but
the regret was that you wish in retrospect that you had said to them, I'd really like to be.
I'd really like to do. You said that you're clever like Woody Allen, but Woody, he's the only one that could do clever for 90 minutes, in a movie.
Right.
And they were right that I was clever for 20 minutes in a movie. So
this is your film, The Ringer, which is 20 minutes.
Like, how do you make that into a feature film? But what they left out was that Woody started doing stand-up. He became Woody Allen doing stand-up, not making movies. And that was the thing that I shoulda, coulda, woulda because I was around all the, David Brenner and all these people when they wwere first.
Richard Pryor.
I saw Andy Kaufman when he was still a bartender at
the Improv.
The Improv in Hell's Kitchen.
Right.
And Bud Friedman would get up, and this was they shouldn't have called it Improv because it's not improv.
No.
It's not what it was. Second City is Improv.
Yeah.
They could have called that.
Could have called it the set list.
and called this First City or something. But he would get up and make a speech and say, you're going to see people that you're not at the Copa. That's why it's $5 to get in. You're not at the Copacabana. So don't, he's talking to Bridge and Charlie, make a speech. Don't expect Martin and Lewis and people.
Right.
Some of them
working it out. They're working it out.
In other words, he's setting you up that you can see people that are just not funny at all, right? It's like putting that in your head, which nobody thought that way. Andy Kaufman, because I talked to him about it that night. This guy was so sharp. He heard this every night. He gets up there. That's where he came up with that foreign man, nervous, shitty, the worst act in history to play on the audience what they've already been told, to make them so uncomfortable.
Right. Like to him, anxiety and hilarity were interchangeable.
And he says, how many here are from Long Island? And people go, what is it? All right. Yeah. And he goes, you know what they say, LOL on the LIE. Now, talk about a reference. That was Herb Oscar Anderson on morning radio on FM would say, well, forget about it. It's LOL, lots of luck on the LIE. Right? And he's waiting for a laugh. And people are like literally squirming. And then here's my meter. I'm like everybody else, right? And I'm here. This is exactly what happened. I'm on 0. And somewhere in a split second, I went, this is the funniest guy I ever.
Right.
Because I see what he's doing.
Right.
And I start laughing, and I was the only one laughing.
Yeah.
My wife's like, like you make it. No, this is the funniest motherfucker I ever saw.
He's doing what Goldthwait also did when he started that people didn't understand. He's doing comedy about comedy.
Exactly. And so I went up to him afterwards and I said, I saw what you did. No, he did the Mighty Mouse thing.
Yeah.
And he would take his time. Nobody ever saw this.
Yeah.
It's like, what's a polished act? This would be the most unpolished act ever, only it was unbelievably fun. Right. He took us on a class trip at 1:00 in the morning out into Hell's Kitchen. Hello, Mr. Hobo. We're all having our drinks. Can you imagine doing that today?
Yeah. No, I can't.
We'd go like boys and girls, double file, and we all walked out into the streets back when Hell's Kitchen was really Hell's Kitchen.
Right.
The guy was a genius. Yeah. So that's another reason why I didn't do it. Because the guys that I loved, I never thought, I'm not in their league. You know what I'm saying? Sure. Like, if you really appreciate what they're doing, it was too intimidating me to be, not to try to be them, but just to go in there and do what they were doing. That's how much I had them in.
Well, your book is called Day of the Living Me. It's great. It's such a fun, fast, easy read. And we barely scratched the surface. There's great stuff about, there's sort of John Lennon, George Burns, Tippi Hedren, John Waters. There's, you've one of those people that has had a Forrest Gumpian journey through show business in the latter half of the 20th century, first part of the 21st century. It's a super great read, and I really recommend it.
Is that a word?
What is it?
Zeligian?
Yes, Zeligian. Yeah. But
we'll make it work.
Yeah, we don't reference Woody Allen anymore. It's a difficult time. Right. And anyway, it's called Day of the Living Me by Jeff Leiberman. Jeff, thanks for coming by.
Just go to jeffleibermandirector.com, and the reason you should do that instead of Amazon is because if you do it from jeffleibermandirector.com,
LIEBERMAN,
I will sign them.
And Jeff Bezos doesn't need any more money.
He doesn't need, he's making money. I have to buy the books. But so Jeff Leiberman Director is one word. Now, back in the 80s, if I said to you, Jeff Leiberman Director is one word, you see, you're out of your mind. And we accept that today.
Yes.
How could that be one word?
It's as my friend said yesterday, it's
All I can tell you is that everything will always be very different.
Other podcasts reach for the sky. Dana Gould bound.
We barely try.
This has been the Dana Gould Hour, brought to you by the Internet. Music by Andy Paley, with Jake Posner behind the board. Produced by Jeff Fox. Graphic design and web production by Spencer Hunt and Segan Friend. Sound editing and post-production by Jalinda Palmer and Joe Napolitano.
Hey, if you like the show, why don't you drop us a line at show@danagould.com. Tom Kenny speaking.
I'm a DJ, I'm a person, I'm a singer, I love to sing and DJ. Boom! Peace out! You want me?